Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is intended solely for educational and entertainment purposes. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony from the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that doesn't breathe. The kind that swallows even the scrape of a chair leg or the soft rustle of legal pads. Phones lowered. Pens froze. Even the judge leaned back a little. He stepped in, slow and deliberate, shoulders tight beneath a slate-gray jacket that didn't quite sit right on him. It wasn't the clothes. It was the weight of years of silence finally cracking wide open. Leonardo DiCaprio took the stand. No one had expected him. Not today. Maybe not ever. His name had never been leaked, not once during discovery. The federal prosecution had played this close. Too close. So when the bailiff said his name aloud, a ripple tore through the courtroom like a fissure in marble. He took the oath with a steady hand, but when he sat down, he hesitated. Just a moment. A beat. Like he was still deciding if he could really do this. Like part of him wanted to turn around and leave it buried. But his jaw clenched. And then he spoke. "I didn't come here to be part of a spectacle," he said. "I've stayed quiet for years. I had my reasons: fear, confusion, shame. But when I saw what was coming out, I couldn't keep carrying that silence." His eyes scanned the room, avoiding Diddy's at first. "I didn't think my story mattered. But then I realized it's not just mine." A low murmur buzzed through the gallery, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. The prosecutor asked him to begin at the beginning. When did he first meet Sean Combs? He sighed, leaned back, eyes fixed somewhere in the middle distance. "It was 1996, he said. "I was 21. Romeo Plaza's Juliet had just dropped. Everything was chaos. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Parties, invitations, press. And somewhere in the middle of that, I got an invite to a bad boy release event. The one at the tunnel in Manhattan. That was the night I met him." He looked down for a beat, then continued. "He was magnetic. Charismatic in a way that made you feel small but important at the same time. Like being around him was a shortcut to something bigger. Power. Permanence. Diddy had invited him back to his private studio in Soho that night. DiCaprio described it in fine detail. The massive leather sectional shaped like a crescent moon, the studio walls wrapped in crimson velvet, a baccarat decanter of XO cognac that never emptied. There was a sense of theater to it, like everything had been set up for maximum impression. He told me, "This is where stars become icons," DiCaprio said. "And I only let real ones through the door." I remember feeling honored, like I'd passed a test I didn't even know I was taking. He paused, swallowed. But even then, there was something. A moment. I remember a girl, young, couldn't have been older than 18, sitting on the arm of his chair. She looked tired, hollow-eyed. He snapped his fingers, and she stood up like she'd been trained to. That detail lingered, hung in the air like smoke. At first, Diddy had played the role of mentor. "He'd talk like we were the same," DiCaprio said. "Two kings. You and me, Leo. You got Hollywood, I got the world." He described the studio as a maze of locked rooms and endless corridors. He called it the House of Flavor. He said each room had a purpose. "You'll see when you're ready." I never asked what he meant. The prosecution asked when he first started noticing more troubling behavior. "Summer of 1999, he said. "He invited me to what he called flavor camp." That was his phrase. "Come out to the estate," he said. "Get a taste." It was this compound out in the Hamptons. You didn't drive there, you were driven. Black SUVs with blacked-out windows. He looked up, locking eyes briefly with Diddy for the first time. That house wasn't just a crash pad. It wasn't a party spot. It was something else. He described arriving late one night, the lawn lit by low torches, music thumping low and steady from underground speakers. A line of women, no, girls, lined up by the pool like mannequins wearing white masks. No talking, just watching. They called it a silent welcome, DiCaprio said, voice tightening. That's when I knew. Something was wrong, the defense objected. Speculation, they argued. The judge let it go. He continued. That first night I wandered a bit. I shouldn't have. There were doors that weren't meant to be opened. I saw things Look, I won't go into everything. But there was a room at the back of the West Wing. Dark velvet curtains lit only by candlelight. Inside, people in masks. Not Halloween masks. Elaborate, gilded ones. Venetian. The kind you see in operas. He paused. Let the silence stretch. Saw someone I recognized. A young artist. I won't say their name. But they looked terrified. The courtroom stirred. Someone gasped. Another murmured. The judge warned the gallery to remain composed. I left the next morning, DiCaprio said. Diddy called me later. Told me I was too green. That I wasn't ready for the deep water. That phrase stuck with him. The deep water! After that I noticed things more. Clauses in contracts about private events and confidential hospitality engagements. I wasn't even signed to him. But if you got near his orbit, you were handed something to sign. He pulled out a folder. Thin. Weathered. These are copies of what I was given, he said. August 2000. An NDA from a trip to the Caribbean. It included a clause that said, and I quote, subject agrees to refrain from disclosing atmospheric, ceremonial, or participatory components of hosted events. That's not standard legal language. The judge allowed the folder into evidence. The prosecution displayed one of the documents on the screen. I didn't think I had anything to hide, he said. I thought he was just eccentric. But now I see it was control. Total control. He shifted in his seat. The emotion was starting to edge in. He blinked hard, but his voice stayed steady. And then came the Atlanta mansion. His tone changed. Darker now. That place was different. Bigger. More people. Less masks, more roles. You didn't just attend, you performed, or you left. The judge called for a recess. DiCaprio sat back, his hands trembling just slightly. The courtroom began buzzing again as the judge stepped down. But even as the room stirred to life, one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. When the court reconvened, the air felt heavier. DiCaprio remained seated, his hands folded tight, knuckles pale. He didn't look at Diddy when he began again. He didn't have to. The words did the staring. The Atlanta mansion wasn't just a house. It was a stage. He leaned forward. You pull up in a Maybach or a Bentley. Never your own car. And the first thing you see is the driveway lined with attendants in all black. Not staff, not security. Attendants. No one spoke unless spoken to. They all had earpieces. Like a film set. Except it wasn't a film. He described the interior. Massive arched ceilings, gold-trimmed columns, a central fountain with rose petals floating in it, even though it wasn't near Valentine's Day. Downstairs, a private theater screening vintage porn and snuff reels from the 70s. Upstairs, guest rooms with no locks on the inside. Everywhere you went, it smelled like Le Labo, Santal 33, and cigar smoke. There was always this playlist running, soft R&B looping on hidden speakers. But it never stopped. It was like being trapped in a dream you couldn't quite wake up from. The gallery hung on every word. At night, things changed. Curtains, drawn, security doubled. You were summoned to rooms, not invited. If you didn't go, you were told you'd be escorted off the premises. No press, no calls, no outside world, just Diddy's world. The prosecutor asked if he'd ever been directly coerced. DiCaprio's voice went quieter. Not at first. It was more subtle than that. You'd get pulled aside, told to relax, to just observe. And then you'd be shown something calculated. A girl crying, a guy passed out, people doing things you didn't ask to see. He took a deep breath. One night I tried to leave early. I said I had a flight. Diddy cornered me near the marble staircase. He put a hand on my chest, smiled, and he said, "Nah, Leo, this is how we do it. You don't bounce from royalties. Table without kissing the ring." He turned his head, looking directly at Diddy now. Diddy didn't react, just sat there, impassive. But his fingers twitched against the defense table. DiCaprio continued. I laughed it off. What else could I do? But it stuck with me, the way he said it. Like I owed him something for simply being there. He paused, swallowed, then reached for another folder. This is from that week. My assistant logged the travel schedule. July 18th, 2001. A series of texts between her and Diddy's team. One of them says, "Ensure Leo gets his gift. Mr. C insists." On the gesture. That gift was a black Rolex left on my hotel pillow. I never wore it. The messages flashed on the court screen. Later I found out the watch had a tracker in it. A low-frequency GPS transmitter. Gasps. Audible. The judge banged the gavel again. No reactions in court. DiCaprio's hands trembled slightly now. Not from weakness, from restraint. He continued. I flew back to LA the next day, told myself I wouldn't return to his circle. But it wasn't that easy. Within 2 weeks I started getting calls, mutual contacts warning me to play ball. One exec even said, "You don't cross Puff. You don't forget who the gatekeepers are." The prosecutor asked if there was further intimidation. Yes, he said. It escalated. Subtle stuff. Black SUVs parked outside my place. My publicist got a cease and desist over a tweet from my burner account about power dynamics in the industry. It was vague, but he knew. He always knew. The room was dead silent. Again, and then came the Caribbean. His voice almost dropped to a whisper. St. Bart's, December 2002. He called it the White Heat Retreat. Only hand-picked guests. You had to sign 2 NDAs before stepping on the private jet. We weren't allowed to bring our own phones. He provided burner Nokias. He stared forward, eyes dark now. There was a private island. No name on the map. The party lasted 3 days. No press, no staff, just performers. His word, not mine, and royalty. There were private cabanas with silk veils. A giant bonfire on the 3rd night. I remember the fire most because someone was screaming behind it, and the music was so loud no one turned. A single juror visibly winced. I asked to leave the next morning. Told him I wasn't feeling well. He smiled again. That same smile. And he said, "Everyone gets the fever, Leo. But you sweat it out, or it owns you." That was his way of saying, stay in line. He opened a leather journal, worn, corners frayed. These are my notes from the trip. Not everything, just enough. Enough to remind myself I wasn't crazy. He flipped through pages. Read one aloud. December 29th, 2002. Woman in red, crying in the surf. Someone took her inside. Don't know who. No one spoke. Just music. Just the fire. His voice cracked for the first time. I kept thinking I could just forget it. That if I didn't name it, it didn't exist. But it followed me. It followed all of us. He looked at the jury. There were others. Always others. Young artists, assistants, even a driver who once warned me, "Don't wander at night. That's when the rules stop." I didn't know what he meant until later. Until Vegas. He stopped. The room leaned forward. But I'll get to that. The prosecution asked if he had attempted to cut ties permanently. I tried, twice. In 2005, I told my agency not to put me in rooms with him. I thought I could draw that line. But I started losing deals. Unofficially, of course. One exec told me, Diddy's in the room whether he's there or not. Then came a story about a recording session at Daddy's House Recording Studio in Midtown Manhattan, fall 2006. I was there visiting Q-Tip, just saying hi. Diddy came in with a group. Music stopped. He looked at me and said, "Didn't think you'd show your face, golden boy." Everyone laughed. But it wasn't a joke. He smiled bitterly. People laughed because they were scared. That's what power looks like. Not screaming, not threats. Just knowing they can end you without raising their voice. He turned again to Diddy. "You remember what you said to me that night?" Diddy didn't respond. "You said, 'The world don't care who you are. It cares who owns the room. And I own this room.'" DiCaprio looked back at the jury. "That's when I knew I couldn't pretend anymore." He glanced at his attorney. A long pause stretched. The judge asked if he needed a break. He shook his head. "Because what happened? In Vegas, that's what changed everything." Gasps again. He leaned into the mic, voice low. "And after that night, after what I saw, I couldn't keep protecting him. Not with my silence." The judge called for adjournment until the next day. But as DiCaprio stepped down, he didn't look shaken. He looked like a man who'd decided to burn the whole house down. And he wasn't finished. Not yet. When court resumed. The next morning, the air was still thick with the weight of what had already been said. Reporters had camped outside overnight. 2 jurors hadn't made eye contact with anyone as they took their seats. Even the judge's voice felt graver when she gavelled in. Leonardo DiCaprio was already on the stand. Waiting. His face looked different. Firmer. Like sleep hadn't come easy, but resolve had. There was no hesitation this time. He sat forward the moment he was asked to continue. "It was New Year's Eve, 2007, he said. Las Vegas. The Palms. Diddy had booked out the entire top floor of the Fantasy Tower. 2 penthouses merged into one. He called it Heaven's Floor. Said it was his temple in the desert." He smiled bitterly. But there was nothing holy about it. He described arriving around 10 p.m., led through a maze of corridors by 2 men in gray silk suits. No names. Just nods. The walls were mirrored on both sides. You couldn't tell which way was forward unless you looked at the carpet. Inside the penthouse, white walls glowing with soft amber uplighting, thick Persian rugs, sculptures of lions, twisted bronze trees. In the center of the living space, a massive glass sculpture of an hourglass, except instead of sand, it was filled with what looked like glittering black stones. Diddy told him, "That's obsidian. It traps what you bring in. But it won't. Give it back." He loved saying things like that. Mystical. Cryptic. Like everything was part of a deeper code only he understood. You start thinking it's genius. Until you realize it's misdirection. It's how magicians work. He described the crowd. A-listers, models, foreign billionaires, and what he described as unplaceable faces. People who didn't belong to music, or film, or fashion. Just power. There were no clocks, he said. Time didn't exist up there. Phones were taken at the door. You had to sign another NDA before you even got your drink. I did it without reading. He held up a copy. I kept this one. The screen displayed the contract. At the bottom, Clause 17. Participation in immersive environments implies consent to optical and auditory isolation. That's not legal language you see in party waivers. He took a breath. Then came the second level, what Diddy called the mirrors below. You accessed it through a spiral staircase hidden behind a bookcase. Every guest was offered the invitation with the same phrase, "You've earned the descent." He glanced toward Diddy again, and this time Diddy looked back. You remember that, don't you? The descent. That was your word. He continued, quieter now. There were no windows down there. Just a long corridor with dim red lighting and music pumping through hidden speakers. Bass so low it rattled your chest. The walls were padded, soundproofed. He paused. What I saw that night, I'll never unsee. There were rooms, partitioned by curtains, some with one-way mirrors, some with cameras. People doing things. To each other, to themselves, not always willingly. I saw someone, I recognized them. A young singer, barely 18. They looked vacant, gone. He didn't name them. I started to walk away. I couldn't take it. And then someone grabbed my arm, one of the security staff. He said, don't wander, don't interfere. Mr. C is watching. He didn't know it then, but he was being monitored. Later, he'd learned the entire floor was under infrared surveillance. That's when I saw Diddy, at the far end, in a room lit by flickering candlelight, surrounded by masked individuals. But his face was bare. That was the power move, everyone else hidden. Him, watching, smiling. And then, his voice dropped. That's when it broke. Something inside me just snapped. I couldn't pretend anymore. He stood slowly in the courtroom with the judge's permission. I confronted him. Right there, in that hallway. He looked at Diddy directly now. You remember what I said? I said, what the hell is this? And you looked at me and said, you came to my temple. You don't ask questions in God's house. Gasps again. This time, louder. You were calm. Cold. You didn't yell. You didn't threaten. You just told me to walk back up the stairs and forget what I saw. And I did. He sat back down, shaking slightly. Not because I agreed, but because I was scared. He turned to the prosecution. And because I knew no one would believe me. Not then. Not when his name carried more weight than truth ever could. The prosecutor asked if he had documentation of that night. He nodded. Not from the party. Phones were banned. But I wrote it down. He pulled out a page, yellowed with shaky handwriting. Jan 1, 2008. Saw him without the mask. Saw the others wear theirs. That's all I'll write. I feel sick. I can't sleep. I won't go back. His voice cracked again. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I had panic attacks, couldn't be in closed spaces. I told my therapist, and even she didn't believe me. Thought it was symbolic, a metaphor, but it wasn't. He paused. There was someone else at that party, a young male singer. He disappeared from the public eye shortly after, went into rehab, then vanished. No interviews, no appearances. I tried to reach him. Got blocked. He looked at the jury now. That's what scared me most. Not what happened, but how fast the industry erased the aftermath. The prosecutor asked about his career after that. I changed. Everything. Took fewer appearances. Stopped going to music events altogether. People thought I was being private. No, I was hiding. From him. From what I'd seen. He leaned into the mic. And I wasn't the only one. There were assistants, he said. Drivers, stylists, makeup artists, people who all knew the same thing, but none of them spoke. They signed things. They feared things. One of them, a girl named Marina, quit suddenly after a trip to Turks and Caicos. She was never heard from again. Not officially. DiCaprio tried to find her in 2011. No trace. She told me before she disappeared. He records everything. That's how he keeps people quiet. He tapped the table softly. I believe he has tapes. I believe he has footage from those parties, because that's the real control. Not just money or threats. It's leverage. He paused. Looked back at Diddy one more time. You said once, the camera never lies, unless I'm the one holding it. Another silence. Unshakable. And I realized That's why you kept inviting people like me. Because if I stayed silent, it gave you cover. If I said nothing, others would follow. He reached for a final document. This is a letter I wrote but never sent. 2014. Addressed to the Department of Justice. I never mailed it. I was afraid. But it starts with one sentence. If I die unexpectedly, look at Sean Combs. The courtroom erupted. The judge struck her gavel 3 times, but the damage was done. And still, he wasn't finished. Not yet. The judge gave the courtroom a full 5 minutes to recover before resuming. People weren't just stunned. They were frozen, as if the words still hadn't finished echoing against the walls. Reporters weren't scribbling anymore. They were just staring. Some of the jurors couldn't even look at him. Leonardo DiCaprio remained seated on the witness stand. His posture was straighter now. Palms flat, no trembling, no more hesitation. Just a slow, hard current pulling him forward. After Vegas, he said, I thought I could bury it. Just focus on the work. Do the press. Show up to the award shows. Pretend like I hadn't seen a man behind the mask. He turned toward Diddy again. But you made sure I couldn't. He explained how it didn't stop after that night. Instead, it got worse. More appearances. More invitations he couldn't ignore. The pressure didn't come directly. It came from within the industry. Agents, studio heads, label execs. People I'd known for years started treating me differently. I lost a role I was guaranteed for, no reason given. I was uninvited to a director's retreat I helped organize. Then the magazine features dried up, quiet at first, then sudden. He rubbed his face slowly, as if he could still feel the heat of that time pressing against his skin. I confronted one of them, a top exec at Universal, asked him point blank if I was being blackballed. He just said, "You don't bite the hands that run the feast." That was his phrase. The feast. Like the industry was a banquet and you were either fed or fed on. And that's when he started writing. I couldn't speak it, but I could write it. I kept journals, notes, voice memos, though even those I deleted after was recording. But I have some. Still, dated, time-stamped, raw. He handed over a USB drive. The judge accepted it into evidence. The prosecution played a portion for the court. January 18, 2009. I heard from the assistant again. She's terrified. Said they found her new address. Said someone left a photo of her from the Hamptons, just slid it under her door. No note. Just that photo. Her in the pool. That same night. I remember it. I was there, she said. I think they know I want to talk. Then the call dropped. I haven't heard from her since. The courtroom listened in silence. That kind of silence that felt like it had weight behind it. I had breakdowns, he said after the audio cut. Full dissociation episodes. I stopped attending parties. I withdrew from friends. I'd hear a certain playlist, slow 90s R&B, and start sweating. Panic attacks. Nausea. He glanced toward the jury. That smell from his parties? The Santal 33? I couldn't be in the same room with it for years. Every time I walked into a hotel lobby, I had to check myself. He recounted how, in 2012, he went completely off-grid for 2 months. No cell phone, no press. People thought it was a break, some retreat thing. It wasn't. I was hiding. But something changed in 2017. That was when the music industry started cracking. People were finally speaking out. Quietly at first. Whisper networks. But the shift was there. And then came a name. Christopher, one of Diddy's former security guards, reached out to me. He didn't say much, just one sentence. What you saw in Vegas wasn't even the worst of it. DiCaprio's face tightened. Christopher's body was found 3 weeks later. Ruled a suicide. No note. No drugs. just a single shell casing in a hotel room in downtown LA. He stared straight ahead. I tried not to connect it, tried not to think he had called me. But he had. He had. The courtroom fell into another hush. No one even moved. I blamed myself. I told myself that maybe if I'd spoken sooner, more people would be okay. That's what kept me up. That's what started the nightmares. The prosecutor asked him to elaborate. I dreamed I was back in the mansion. Back in the room with the velvet curtains. The music always the same. But in the dream, no one had a face. Just masks. Except him. He didn't need to say Diddy's name. I started therapy again. Intensive this time. Trauma-focused. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I hadn't wanted to call it that, but I couldn't avoid it anymore. He tapped the folder again. I brought my therapy notes. I brought the diagnosis. Because people think silence means complicity. It doesn't. Sometimes it means survival. Then came the second confrontation. In 2019, at a private Oscar party in Bel Air, I saw him again. Diddy. I hadn't seen him in person since that night in Vegas. He walked up, grinned. Like nothing ever happened. He leaned into the mic. And he said, "Still silent, Leo? Good. That's what I like about you." A low gasp. Again. This time from someone in the back. I went home that night and broke down. On the floor. Couldn't breathe. Because I knew he wasn't just talking about the past. He was talking about control. The prosecutor asked why he finally decided to testify. DiCaprio looked down, took a moment, then met the jury again. Because I saw the stories starting to leak. Not just mine, others. And I knew, if I didn't speak, he'd bury it all again. He'd pay it away, silence it, and another generation would go through it. He pulled out a photograph. It was blurred by the court clerk for the jury only, but DiCaprio described it. This is a photo from the Bahamas compound. 2010. In it, there are 4 young artists. 3 of them no longer work in the industry. 1 attempted suicide. All of them signed to him. He turned it toward Diddy. I still remember the look in their eyes. The same one I had. Confused. Unsure if this was success or captivity. Another photo. This one, a group shot in Manhattan. A New Year's party. Puffy white coats. Crystal. Flutes. Everyone in this photo had a file. A clause. A contract. A silence clause. I've seen them. He paused, sharpened his voice. There are more of us. I know that now. More who were told they were chosen. Special. And then discarded. Controlled. The judge asked if he had anything else to present. He nodded. One more thing. He handed over a letter. Handwritten. Tear-stained. It's from an anonymous young woman? Sent to me through my attorney after the media started speculating I might testify. She wrote, "You saw what I saw. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was alone. Please don't let him win again." He blinked away tears. Not performative. Just real. And that's why I'm here. He looked back at Diddy. Squarely now. You once told me, legends don't bleed. But here I am. Bleeding. And I'm still standing. The courtroom stood still. You could almost hear the collective intake of breath. And then, just under his voice, he said, "And if I fall, I promise you I won't fall alone." But the fall hadn't come yet. Not yet, Leonardo. DiCaprio's final words from the day before still lingered like ash on the air as the courtroom gathered for the last time. Daylight poured through the high windows like some kind of judgment. Outside, the world had turned. News outlets ran the testimony in bold red banners. Hollywood murmured in closed rooms. Some celebrities deleted old photos. Others issued statements. And inside the courtroom, the weight of years, decades, hung in the space between truth and consequence. He was called back to the stand. No fanfare. No reporters allowed inside today. Just the jury, the attorneys, the judge, the accused, and a witness who, by now, had given more than testimony. He had offered a reckoning. DiCaprio adjusted the mic, cleared his throat. He didn't look tired. He looked resolved, like something had calcified in him overnight. The prosecutor asked if he had anything further to add. "Yes," he said. And then he looked at Diddy one last time. "You remember when we sat in that studio in Soho? Fall of '96? You poured us? That Louis XIII and said, 'You're going to be immortal, Leo. Just stick with me. Immortality's contagious.'" He laughed softly. Not from humor, from disbelief. "I thought that meant success, glory. But what you meant was rot. You meant silence, secrets." He gestured toward the evidence table, piled high now with folders, emails, journal entries, contracts, NDAs, photographs, and timelines that bled into each other like oil in water. "You spent years building a machine no one could stop. Not with truth, not with law. Because it wasn't just you. It was the system around you. Assistants who looked the other way. Execs who called it eccentricity. Publicists who spun it into legend. Drivers who signed papers they didn't read. And all of us who knew just enough to be scared, but not enough to speak." He glanced at the jury now. "I don't expect you to believe every word. I don't expect you to feel what I felt. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for recognition." His voice slowed, became deliberate. "I was complicit, with my silence. I let him borrow my face, my presence, my absence, my name. That made me powerful. And powerless. I was a shield he didn't have to pay for." He turned back to Diddy. Something in his tone hardened. "You made yourself a god. Built temples in Vegas, in the Caribbean, in the Hamptons. You wore guilt like cologne and convinced the world it was genius. You said, 'Legends don't bleed.' But the truth is, you were never a legend. You were a man. And men bleed." He paused. "And you will." The courtroom didn't gasp this time. It exhaled. A long, shuddering release. Because it was the moment they realized the story wasn't just about one man. It was about all of them. He described the calls he'd received over the past week. Quiet calls, anonymous ones, former assistants, artists, session musicians, 2 choreographers, 1 Grammy-winning vocalist who hadn't performed publicly in years, each one saying the same thing. "You're not crazy. I saw it too. Tell them I exist." He held up a printed list of names, redacted for the record, but it stretched across 2 pages. There are more, and they're watching this. They're waiting to see if it matters, if coming forward matters, if it's safe. He leaned back. "Slightly. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about the architects of silence. The lawyers who wrote the clauses. The managers who said, 'Don't make trouble.' The label heads who said, 'He's too big to fall.'" He looked directly at the defense table. "And the man who believed the world would always protect him, because it always had." He stood. "The judge allowed it. I used to believe that if I told this story, it would destroy me. That people would say I was exaggerating, delusional, looking for attention. But I'm not afraid anymore, because I've already lost what I feared losing. And I'm still here." He stepped away from the mic. A beat of silence followed. The kind that didn't invite another word. The judge asked if he wished to give a closing statement to the court. He did. He walked slowly to the center of the courtroom, stood between the defense and the jury. Not a performance, just gravity. "I'm doing this for the ones who didn't survive." He scanned the gallery. "For the ones who were told they asked for it. For the ones who signed away their voices, before they even understood what they were giving up. For the ones who vanished, who went to rehab and never came back, for the ones who were buried under other people's legends. And then, with complete clarity, he said, "I'm here because I'm done protecting monsters dressed as moguls." He turned back to Diddy. "You once told me the industry was built on secrets, that it fed on the things people were too afraid to say out loud. But here I am, saying them, out loud, on record." He walked back to the stand, sat down, and then, in a voice softer than a whisper but firm as stone, "This ends with me." The judge thanked him. Court was adjourned for the day. No applause, no commotion, just the truth, laid bare. Outside, the world was already changing. Names were trending. Statements were being drafted. Artists were texting each other behind locked phones. Executives were asking for audits, investigations, damage control. But some weren't hiding anymore. Within 48 hours, 3 more former bad boy artists released joint statements. 2 refused to remain anonymous. An intern from the 2004 Miami shoot handed over a duffel bag full of old mini-DV tapes to the FBI. A former assistant shared an email chain dated 2006. Subject line, "The Mirror List." One by one, the stories began to bloom. Not all identical. Not all from the same places. But connected by shape, by feeling, by fear. And all of them echoed with the same root. It started at the parties. It ended in silence. Until now, the trial proceeded. Leonardo DiCaprio returned to the courtroom only once more. Quiet, unannounced, seated in the back. No cameras caught him. He didn't testify again. He didn't have to. He'd already done what few ever do. He looked the system in the eye and said, "Not this time." And for the first time in a long time, it blinked.